Hey, what up, fam? This is Saul Levy, host of Africans in Tech, where we're building bridges and shaping futures in tech. Got another dope whiteboard session for you. Today, we got Rubena. She's going to be talking about Cyber Audit Life Cycle. So I'm very interested in this, so tune in, guys. Rubena, off to you.
Hi, guys. Today we'll be talking about the Cyber Audit Life Cycle, which is detailed in 4 different phases. First, we have planning, data collection, reporting, and then remediation. So let's go into the planning process. This is the idea of reviewing the partner's contracts and making sure it's in relevance with the frameworks and specific scopes within the contract and the organization. Now we move to data collection. This is where we're reviewing some of the policies within the contract. So how a company is reacting in incident response, their network segmentation, and also removable media. And then we move to reporting, which is where we're grading and also scoring the risks that we find within their contract, and also reporting any tools in their processes that might be out of compliance. In this process, we also implement recommendations for them to fix those controls and minimize the risk. When we get to the remediation process, this is where we're finding out if there's any updates on policies in accordance with some of our control recommendations that were mentioned in the reporting process.
Nice.
We also confirm that the changes were implemented in scope with some of the frameworks and also the policies set by the organization. And we also make sure they do it in a timely fashion to make sure that they are in accordance with some service level agreements.
Awesome. Cool. So a couple questions there. So like in planning, right?
Yes.
What are a couple of things that are usually common things that you see in planning, whether it's mistakes or things that should be done based on like best practices?
So with the scope and framework, we like to review their contracts to make sure that everything, things are added to it that they might have overlooked, or make sure it's clearly defined to the point where someone who might not be technical could understand what the purpose of that standard or clause is in the contract.
Gotcha.
And also, as we onboard external partners, it's important that as they join our company, they're also in compliance with our own regulations that we hold.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and overall, this is similar to like supply chain, right?
Yes, this is supply chain.
Okay.
So this would be the process we use when we're evaluating a third-party vendor. So someone who is interested in becoming a vendor for our supply chain. So for example, if I was a laptop company, I would reach out to the external partner to see their contract, what specific policies and frameworks that they hold within their organization, compare it to the contracts and regulations that we have in our organization, and then ultimately see what gaps between I'm supposed to be looking at the camera. And then ultimately review compare and contrast each of the contracts to see what gaps are in between.
Okay, cool. And the reason why supply chain is so important, guys, if you're not familiar, it's when you think about SolarWinds, there's a few others that have gotten attacked, and they basically think about you install something in your house, right, from some random vendor, whether it's like a thermostat, right, and that thermostat has like some sort of bug or issues with it, and it causes everything else in your house to be hacked because somehow a hacker used some sort of vulnerability in that device, and now everything else in your house is compromised. So from a enterprise standpoint, think about you have, let's say, some device, whether it's IPS, IDS, or some other tool that is used within your entire environment that you put in there, and you install it, and it's on every one of your users' laptops and every one of your servers, and you think that device or application, whatever it is supposed to be helping you, and you find out that it has a vulnerability that is causing everybody else to be at risk. So that's why something like this is extremely important, because if you don't plan well, you don't collect the data around it, and you don't have ways to kind of remediate when you have issues, you're gonna be in trouble. So this is really good. Let's talk a little bit about like data collection. Like, what are some things that you think about when we're collecting data?
So in this specific instance, it's very important that we meet with the partner to see that they can clearly define how they're putting information into the system and also giving information.
Nice.
So in this specific concept, we would hold a meeting with the external partner and be sure to ask open-ended questions to see about their cybersecurity posture.
Yep.
So whether or not they have a incident recovery plan or their failover time in different processes, and also tabletop exercises in the case of an incident transpiring. And it also tells us the areas of where we can provide recommendations for them to help them with their learning, especially in regards to some of our overseas partners.
Yep, awesome. So guys, I know we've talked a lot about like Splunk and other endpoint agents, right? So imagine like, let's say your Splunk forwarder, which is just an agent. Think about it like some device or tool you install on your laptop. Let's say that tool gets compromised or has like a bug or something like that, and it needs to be fixed. So Splunk has to come out with a fix very quick, like a hot fix to say, hey, we need to patch everything. You're smiling.
Oh, no smile.
No, you're good. You're
Okay.
good. So let's say Splunk comes out with something that needs to be fixed very quickly. So if that thing needs to be fixed very quickly and there's no way for them to get that new upgrade patch, whatever it is, to you, that becomes a serious issue, especially from a global company standpoint, right? So that's why something like this is very important when you think about how do we patch our stuff if something is buggy. What are ways that you're going to get that new patch to us? How fast are you going to get it to us? And how do we know that that new thing that you're sending to us doesn't also have like 0-day bugs or issues that we can find? So that's why it's very important to know how they're collecting that information, and then also who's getting that information as well. Because at the end of the day, they send like telemetry stuff that looks at like your basically like what you're collecting and how it's collecting it. They basically try to analyze like how their tool is doing. So if they're analyzing that, who else is also seeing that data?
Right.
That's extremely important because, if you don't know who's handling your data, you're in big trouble. So
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
Okay. No worries. No worries. So reporting also is like really important as well. So you hear a lot of times of how these companies like, they don't disclose like when they get hacked and stuff like that, when issues happening. Like it's extremely important that, you have some level of transparency, with your outside third-party vendors, because if not, they're placing not just you at risk, but also your customers at risk as well. So that's why it's important to have a very good understanding of like what sort of like recommendations are being put out there, and is there recommendations or requirements, so those are things that, you really gotta make sure you're aware of. When it comes to like reporting, is there like a specific tool or anything that's used for that, or is it just more like collaborative effort to grab that information?
So this is a collaborative effort, but if we're thinking on a business aspect, it normally depends on the team. So this may vary in terms of risk scoring and grading. So with specific teams that I've been on previously, we've made our own methodologies considering previous frameworks and other risk matrix that other teams might use. So we grade it based off of that.
Nice. And then for those in the government space, RMF framework, you think about NIST 853, blah, blah, blah. So there's so many different things that happen, whether you're, and I think you mentioned this in the interview. So if you haven't watched that, definitely go watch that. It was a fire interview when she talked about, from a compliance perspective, like SOX, Sarbanes, like whether you're working with like banks, or let's say like HIPAA, if you're working with organizations that have to deal with like people's healthcare or just data in itself that's like personable, like PII, like those kinds of things are extremely important, because if you handle that the wrong way, you're putting people's families, kids, and all that at a risk. So those are things that are really important when it comes to like planning around what that looks like. And then lastly, remediation, updates on policies. How would you work with a company that's kind of delayed when it comes to like updating their policy? Have you ever had that situation?
So yes, I've had experience of people not being in compliance or not taking proactive measures. So ultimately that means escalating the situation. And also this is a brief of the contract as well. So once that's escalated, the next team would kind of take it from there. However, we take measures to minimize confrontation like that. So constant following up and bi-weekly meetings with the team to work on those updated policies, and also verify through whether it be virtual meetings, just showing proof of how the policy has been updated. And normally this can be in a cycle of 30, 60, or 90 days, but oftentimes depending on how big the partner is, it may vary.
Nice. Awesome. So guys, I mean, I think this was a fantastic job by Rubena. She's definitely a scholar. And it definitely shows. So if they wanted to get in touch with you to kind of find out more about, you know, sort of like either your journey or even asking more questions around this, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. If you'd like to stay connected, please connect with me on LinkedIn at Rubena Uyeh.
Okay, awesome. And then if for any reason you can't find her social media handles, we'll have her information at the bottom of wherever you're watching this, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, wherever. We'll have her handles there. And if you have any questions in regards to this or anything else, feel free to ping us at africansinTechnology@gmail.com. Again, it's africansinTechnology@gmail.com. My name is Sar Levy. This is Africans in Tech, where we're building bridges and shaping futures in tech. All right, fam.
Hey, what up, fam? This is Sar Levy, host of Africans in Tech, where we're building bridges and shaping futures in tech. Just a quick reminder for those who've not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. You can catch all of our content, including our whiteboard sessions, where you'll find our full-length videos on our channel. And hit that notification bell, fam. All right?